Okay, now something truly important that I've always talked about instead of just my pathetic inability to deal with reality. Uh, Mariba Jah, he's an aerodynamicist at the University of Texas at Austin. So, up until about a decade ago, we've launched an average of 80 to 100 satellites per year, varying orbits, NEO out to GEO. All of them are, most of them are within 1,000 kilometers of Earth. But now we have Starlink. So in 2017, the number exceeded 300. Just like that. In 2020, we broke 1,000 for the first time. Now, this year already in 2022, we have launched in excess of 2,000. And this is all this broadband people that are like Amazon is going to start the same program that SpaceX is doing, wanting to dump all these satellites into NEO, excuse me. So this near Earth area is becoming extremely crowded. Then we had this Long March booster unexpectedly broke up. I find that very fucking suspicious. This is what I suspect happened. I'm not going to put it as a question. I'm going to tell you this is what I think happened. I think they used that as a target. Unless it struck another object, because it broke into 300 trackable pieces. That's a fucking rocket booster broke into 300 trackable pieces. Those are fairly large, the size of footballs, a meter. For that to happen, it had to either strike something very large or by many objects at once, because there's nothing there. There's no atmospheric, there's no dynamic forces acting on the booster at the time it exploded into pieces. Most of the fuel had been spent, right? You don't carry that much extra fuel to blow your fucking rocket booster into, I mean, maybe the motor might separate from your main tube that have your fuel tanks in it, something like that. But that you wouldn't get 300 trackable. We know there's 300 trackable because it's been said there are 300 trackable pieces of that Long March booster. And so it's getting pretty fucking crowded. And everyone knows, if you've been with me for any length of time, that I know one of the problems that I understand is being driven, again, by fucking commercialism and the seeking of profits, okay, without thinking about the planet, again. So oil despoiled our planet, and now we're letting technology despoil our space. I do very little filming of videos that are deep now, because there's just too much fucking shit flying around in strange fucking orbits. So he's predicting that someone is going to die, that people will be lost later this decade. Entire orbital areas will be lost to functional use. Do you hear about this on the 6 o'clock news? Does Tucker Carlson talk about this on the 6 o'clock news? No, he's too busy pumping up Russia and downgrading America. Does anyone talk about this? CNN? CBS, MSNBC, does anyone want to discuss the number of objects we're throwing out there into near Earth orbit that is now starting to happen exactly as I predicted 15 years ago when Kessler said they put that into a computer, the best at the time, and the answer that came out was 1, which was an affirmative, that it was going to happen. There was no option. The Kessler syndrome was, if we kept up that same rate of launch schedule 15 years ago, that it was going to happen. It was just a matter of time. And now here we are going from a maximum of 300 a year to over 2,000. Most of these objects don't have deorbiting devices attached to them. There's no monetary incentive to build satellites to go out and capture junk that isn't going to make you a dime. I don't know if countries will be willing to pay a commercial vendor. I don't know if countries will pay a commercial vendor to go up and pick up their shit and bring it back. But it needs to be done. There's no doubt about it. Right now, the odds, 1 is now 1 plus. It's not just going to happen, but now we have a time factor in it. When you throw that in, it gets pretty fucking scary for me. And now we have an astrodynamicist from the University of Texas, Austin, saying, yep, we're going to lose whole orbits and we're going to lose people later this decade. You see, we're going to start wanting to go back to the moon, and we can only track pieces of a certain size, of say the size of a basketball. A basketball. But if you take a piece of material this big, a piece of aluminum from a panel or something that's about, half this thickness, and you accelerate it to 25,000 miles an hour, and it runs into another object that's going between 17 and 25,000 miles an hour, what you get is a lot of energy. I mean, they have pieces of aluminum this thick that they've fired little nuts at that basically blow giant melted craters out of this giant thick fucking aluminum. And we can't send vehicles into space with aluminum shielding that big. We have to use Kevlar and these, multi-layered catch systems to try to dissipate the energy, okay, and not try to stop the object through sheer brute force. We have to massage it to a standstill. And still, the Canadian arm got a hole knocked right through it. And that could have just as easily been over a little bit further and went through the fucking cupola of the space station. Or any other vulnerable part of the space station. Unknown. There was no warning. There was no something's in, they call it a pizza box. That the space station sits in that is covered by protection and is always watched, and if anything is going to come within that pizza box, then they make a decision to move the space station, which is both costly and time consuming, wasting. But now it's getting to the point where we're talking about sending people back into space, and not this crap Jeff Bezos is doing, which is barely legally reaching the edge of space. Barely the legal altitude for saying we went to space. Just because you're free falling doesn't mean that you're in space. I don't know, I worry about that. I worry about the consequences of the first human fatalities from space debris, and maybe that's what it will take to make people change. But then I look at the world now and what climate change is doing, where thousands of people are starving to death every day and people are losing their homes every day. Bangladesh went from growing rice to an absolute flooded fucking area where they now raise seafood, prawns and shrimp because of that much water rise. We haven't changed. People are dying and suffering now. Nobody give a fuck. Maybe if a high value target like an astronaut with a name and white skin, or actually black skin now, gets killed in space, something will be done about it. When we know, you see, we're going to have an investigation. That's what you'll see. There'll be a denial because no one's going to want to stop doing business as usual. No one's going to want to stop and go, okay, we have to stop and quit sending shit into space. We have to stop and start cleaning stuff up before we send any more up, etc., etc. We're going to have to figure out new technologies for catching these fast-moving particles this size that we can't detect. We know that there's 60-something thousand objects that they're tracking. But we know that there's at least 2 million objects out there that are between the size of a basketball and something like a fleck of paint. There are probably a lot of objects that big. And that's what it's going to take. And this guy is now saying that it's going to happen. You see, he understands the truth of the Kessler syndrome and the fact that back then, with 300 satellites a year, the best computer on the planet at the time said, it's going to happen, you need to do something about it. And of course we didn't. We just now launched 2,000 a year instead. So I hope it doesn't happen, but it appears that now more and more people are starting to agree with my opinion that it's going to happen.